Hello everyone. We will have we need to wait for another 5 minutes for our first speaker to join us. Please be patient with us. Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. So, a second. Okay, so our webinar today is about conservation of threatened lesser-known species for ASEAN experience. And this webinar is organized by IUCN, SSC, IDSSG. And this webinar is actually part of the global event that organized by IUCN, or refers to RAD. So refers to RAD is, it's like, what's happening here? It's an annual celebration of all the conservation work to reverse trends of biodiversity loss. So we believe that biodiversity conservation deserves to be in the conservation with habitat and also for climate movement. And ID, sorry. Yes, I would like to introduce you to IUCN SSC IDSSG. So it's actually part of IUCN Species Survival Commission, and it's for Indonesian Specialist Group, and that's our organizer today. So this webinar is actually wanted to highlight, that ASEAN region is a global hotspot for biodiversity, and we also know that ASEAN is home to a vast array of species, many of which are lesser known and understudied. While significant attention has been given to, like charismatic megafauna, we realize that numerous amphibians, birds, primates, fishes and other lesser known species, they also face significant threats. And that's why this webinar, we wanted to highlight the efforts, challenges, and successes in conserving this often overlooked species across Asian countries. That's why for this webinar, we have like 5 amazing speakers that and they are like representative from ASEAN countries. So I would like you to, before we started, I really wanted to, like introduce our speakers to the participants. And I humbly request to our speakers when I mention and just introduce you, if it's okay for you to just turn on the camera and to say hello, and I will just read like a short brief about you, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
okay.
Yep, sure.
Thank you. So our first speaker for today is my apologies if I pronounce your name incorrectly. You can just you can just mention. I'm sorry, it's a bit loud here. So for our first speaker, we have Naumai Tan or Manao from Myanmar Biodiversity Fund.
Ini yang populasi, yang TE.
And Manao will talk about resilience in the face of the conservation challenges in Myanmar. So Manao is Deputy CEO of MBF, overseeing activities related to protected areas capacity development, expansion, and governance, and the focal person for developing the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. And prior to MBF, Manao also worked for WCS Myanmar as Deputy Country Director, Range Conservation Officer to Forest Department, strengthening protected areas management, staff capacity building, multi-stakeholders engagement, and public conservation awareness. Manao also has a BSc in forestry, MSc in wildlife management from the University of Forestry in Yesin, Myanmar, a diploma in environmental management from Dresden Technological University in Germany, and a PhD in forest environmental management from Seoul National University in Korea. Welcome, Manao. And the second one we have the second one we have Jason Ibanez from Philippine Eagle Foundation. Hello, Jason.
Yeah,
Okay.
hi Irene, hi everyone.
Hi. So Jason is a director of operations at the Philippine Eagle Foundation. He also professorial lecturer 5 at the University of the Philippines, Mindanao, adjunct professor at CESAM UP Los Baños, and an IUCN SSC Commission member. He has a PhD degree in natural resource management from Charles Darwin University, Australia. He has BC and MC biology degrees from UP Los Baños and Ateneo de Davao University. Sorry if I pronounced it incorrectly. And he also champions indigenous community engagement in conservation. And the third one, we have Hathang Long from Green Viet. And Long will talk about conservation of the black shank dog langur in Vietnam. Hello, Long. Are you with us today? Okay, so Long is a doctor of ecology, chairman of Green Viet, and Long currently works with the Frankfurt Zoological Society. And Long started working in the field of nature conservation in 1999 with the Primate Rescue Center. It's hard to pronounce, I'm sorry. Puong National Park. In 2009, Long finished his PhD program in animal ecology at Stillian College, University of Cambridge in the UK. And Long also, when Long at Kon Kan Kin National Park, GLA, Long met enthusiastic young people who love nature like Thin, Vin, and Baum. From there, the idea of building the Green Viet Biodiversity Conservation Center was formed. And Long also wishes to join hands with the community to protect primeval forests and wild animals for future generations. And our fourth speaker for today is Darren J. Yeo from National University of Singapore, who will talk about conservation of freshwater biodiversity in an urbanized city. Hello, Darren.
Hey everyone.
Hello. So Darren is Associate Professor at Department of Biological Society, National University of Singapore. He's also head of Lee Kong Chian National History Museum and research affiliate with the Tropical Marine Science Institute, and also a chair of IUCN SSC, Singapore Species Specialist Group. Welcome to this webinar. And last but not least, we have Mirzadi Kusrini from IPB University, who's also co-chair for IUCN SSC, IDSSG. Bhumiki will talk about a one-plan research approach of the critically endangered Leptoprena cruentata, or the bleeding toad. Hello, Bhumiki.
Halo, apa kabar? How are you, everyone?
Hi, baik. Okay, so Bhumiki, she's a lecturer at the Faculty of Forestry and Environmental Science, IPB University, Indonesia, specializing in herpetology, particularly reptiles and amphibians. She also contributes to the conservation and understanding of this species and actively supports citizen science initiatives to engage the public in herpetological research. Okay, so without further ado, I think we will just start with our first speaker. Okay, thank you. Okay, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And we move on to the Philippines, where my role this afternoon is to present about our national bird. Well, it's basically considered to be a megafauna in the Philippines, but I just believe that the Filipinos might be very familiar with the Philippine eagle, but to share about the conservation work that's being done on behalf of the species, and the species being also an umbrella and flagship species for the conservation of equally important but lesser known biodiversity in the Philippines. This is a photo of a newly hatched eaglet from the wild that my team just verified. And we're very happy to share that this hatching was possible only through the help of indigenous communities who are at the forefront of protecting the Philippines' natural heritage, not only on behalf of the Filipinos, but also on behalf of global citizens. Okay, so let me give 5 reasons why we think global citizens should help in the conservation of our national bird, the Philippine eagle. The Philippine eagle is a unique product of evolutionary creation. It's just one of several large eagles, but based on a DNA study that has been done in 2005, it appears to be the largest snake eagle family in the world. So that means it's a bearer of a unique a bloodline that we should all help contribute to conservation. It's also a very majestic and charismatic species. This female eagle here shows the flamboyant crest feathers and the blue-gray eyes of tantalizing blue-gray eyes of our national bird. It's really a pity if we would lose this majestic creature. The Philippines, like many island archipelagos, doesn't have the charismatic carnivorous apex predators, such as the lions of the African savannas and the tigers of Asia. But in the Philippines, we have a majestic forest eagle as our apex predator, performing very important ecological functions in the tropical forest ecosystem. And it's a very apt symbol of our nation because although they're perfect killing machines, and we all know as naturalists that predators can become or transform to tender parents, and take care of their young. And they've been doing so for thousands, if not millions of years. Again, I mentioned something about the phylogenetic relationship of Philippine eagles. Formerly, they thought that they belong to the harpy eagle group, that they're relatives to the large forest eagles of South and Central America, like the harpy eagle, the crown eagle of Africa, the New Guinea harpy eagle. But it turns out that the Philippine eagle belongs to the snake eagle group. And again, it holds the global record of being the largest snake eagle in the world. But sadly, because of the combination of being a evolutionarily unique species that is globally endangered or critically endangered, the Philippine eagle ranks as the second um, evolutionarily distinct and globally endangered or edge species, which means that it's a global priority for conservation. The Philippine eagle is found only in the Philippines. The Philippine archipelago has over 7,000 islands, but it's only found in four major islands, namely Luzon, Samar Leyte, and it's an obligate forest dweller. It could not live outside the forests, and the forest of the Philippine archipelago co-evolved with the Philippine eagle. Unfortunately, like many areas around the globe, the Philippines have lost majority of the forest from 90% of our total land area of 300,000 square kilometers being forested during 1500s. That's down to only 20% of the total land area. And this meant that the eagles and other biodiversity have lost most of their precious shelter, breeding places, as well as habitats. And sadly, persecution of our national bird and many other wildlife also continues. They're victims of shooting and trapping. This is an X-ray of a Philippine eagle that was rescued with 10 airgun pellets inside its body. We were able to rehabilitate this bird and release it back to the wild. That's what we do. Unfortunately, it survived and it bred several times. Eagles are also victims of accidental trapping. They're very adept at flying, but they also extensively walk on the ground. And we're finding ways together with the indigenous peoples to prevent accidental captures in snares that are intended for deer and wild pig. And that's why partnerships with indigenous communities and encouraging voluntary giving up traditional hunting using snares or traps becomes very important for conservation. I just would like to show the extent of human persecution for Philippine eagles. In the Philippines, out of 100 Philippine eagles that we've rescued since the 1970s, in our facility, almost 70% of these rescues were due to human persecution. They were either shot, trapped, or taken forcibly from the nests. And this continues up to this day. And sadly, majority of these rescues are of immature eagles, very naive and vulnerable juveniles and immatures from 2 to 5 years old are being removed from the wild because of human persecution. And we believe that if this continues, the Philippine eagle might suffer from population collapse with the younger generation, with the lack of younger generation to replace those that have adults that have died or have perished. And recently, we are also having trouble with accidental electrocution. Now, the Philippine Eagle Foundation, we're an NGO, and our mission is to help the government and the Filipino people to save a national bird, as well as its forest habitat, but also use the Philippine eagle as a flagship for biodiversity conservation, being an umbrella indicator and flagship species, and also use the Philippine eagle as a flagship for indigenous empowerment. And the beauty of doing conservation, Philippine eagle conservation, is that we're also hosting several biodiversity assessment, partnering with both local and international scientists to document the other unique biodiversity within Philippine eagle habitats. And I'll be sharing later some amazing outcomes of this collaboration, primarily because, in terms of getting government permits as well as getting community support, it's relatively easier, to get being a charismatic species, getting public and government support to any research and projects happening within Philippine eagle nesting sites. We're very proud of two international papers that came out describing the home range and habitat use of Philippine eagles, as well as the result of our telemetry work. We did this in partnership with the Peregrine Fund of the US, and we came up with an estimate of the population, average of 392 breeding pairs, and a estimation of the suitable Philippine eagle habitats of almost 3 million hectares, which is barely 10%, of the total land area of the Philippines. And I'm pleased to share that this findings has become a basis, of the national government in its plans, particularly within for its species action plan for Philippine eagles, as a major reference, including, in the calculation of thresholds and also in funding priorities. And now we're working closely with the national government, through the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, to improve on these estimates, but more importantly, make sure that each of the nesting territories, especially those that are not protected yet, gets the attention that it deserves. The paper also identified gaps in the protected area establishment across the Philippines. The protected area coverage of suitable Philippine eagle habitats are only at 32%. And again, I'm pleased to share that the national government, through the help of local government units, are trying to improve that number in compliance also with the national commitment to the Convention on Biological Diversity, by using the Philippine eagle as a flagship for protected area establishment, where the national government is also doing its best to comply with its commitment to the global biodiversity framework. Let me just share with you a visualization of the movements of a immature Philippine eagle that we've instrumented with a GPS tracker. And this, in a way, also revolutionized our knowledge on the importance of biological corridors. I'm pleased to share that this is an undeniable evidence of the value of corridors of forest as an important dispersal area for Philippine eagles. And now work is underway to establish protected areas within this particular corridor. This forest corridor here, being utilized by an immature Philippine eagle, is within the Eastern Mindanao Biodiversity Corridor of Mindanao. And we're part of a collaboration, multi-stakeholder collaboration, with investment from the UNDP, GEF, to establish a network of protected areas, including ICCAs, Indigenous and Community Conserved Areas, local conservation areas, to make sure that there's safe passage for not only for Philippine eagles, but other biodiversity within that area. This is another map of movements, the movement of a Philippine eagle using riparian forest as a passageway from when moving from one mountain to the other. So much of the efforts now is protecting these corridors that links uh, large chunks of landscapes, forest landscapes, and protected areas. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Philippine Eagle research has also become a platform for studies of other important biodiversity. These are examples of new species of flora and fauna that was discovered within Philippine eagle nesting territories, as the Philippine Eagle Foundation collaborated with government and international academic institutions, such as the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. They were able to identify three site endemic rodents within a Philippine eagle nesting territory, one of which is a new genus of a cloud rat, Hamigitan batomis, and a new species of Rafflesia called the Rafflesia Veracruz. And I think that's the power and beauty of using a national icon as a flagship for research on other lesser known but equally important flora and fauna. There are several challenges and gaps. No, we still don't know much about the Philippine eagles in Luzon. Luzon has the second largest extant population of Philippine eagles. Mindanao has the greatest number of extant Philippine eagle pairs, more than 200 pairs to be exact. And so the things that have been piloted and done in Mindanao are now being rolled out in Luzon, again, as guided by the paper on population estimates and species distribution modeling that I've just mentioned. And I think what's really nice about this new information coming out is that it has become a basis for actions and policy. And I think again, that's the beauty of doing research using a national icon as a target focal species. May I also mention that the Philippine eagle is also in our highest bill denomination, the 1,000 peso bill. The Philippine eagle face there is from an eagle that's been rescued, which is now at the Philippine Eagle Center, which we also manage as a breeding and rehabilitation facility. Speaking of breeding program, we were able to breed 31 eagles in captivity. The research continues. The idea is to use conservation breeding as a supplement to increase population numbers in the wild. Where we just finished a paper that proves that the genetic diversity of the captive bred birds are even greater than the birds that were rescued or tagged in the wild, which proves that indeed the conservation breeding program for the Philippine eagle is helping increase genetic diversity. The exciting aspect now of future work would be releasing suitably reared eagles back to the wild in vacant habitats where they could help increase population numbers. Just a list of the natural Philippine eagle pairs that we take care of and breed at the Philippine Eagle Center. All of these birds are rescued birds. They are no longer fit to be released in the wild. Some lost their eyesight, few were amputated, some broke their legs, but we're making sure that their bloodline persists by breeding them in captivity, and of course, equally important is giving them a decent life. Although they're in captivity, at least they earn some comfort, and they become ambassadors also to those visiting our Philippine Eagle center. We also do cooperative artificial insemination. We were successful at doing this. We've loaned a Philippine eagle to Bird Paradise in Singapore, and that bird is also being prepared for artificial insemination using frozen semen from the Philippines that would be transported to Singapore once this.
She
Sorry,
seems
you're still mute. Yeah, you're still on mute.
Sorry. Well, again, thanks for the question, Alexander. So, as I was saying, it's the same general approach that Manao is also doing in their country. In the Philippines, since indigenous lands are practically owned by indigenous peoples, we have a law that protects that. It's also mandatory to do what you call the ancestral domain sustainable development and protection planning. But sadly, there's no subsidy from the government for these processes, and even in the implementation of their plans. So through participatory planning, that's our entry point. For a ancestral domain that has been host to a nesting site, we work with indigenous peoples and capitalize on the idea that they have this really deep cultural ties to the land and to the resources. So um, entry point is participatory planning. We non-judgmental. It's basically them putting their aspirations on the plan and then articulating their worldviews, articulating the relationship to the land, and then finding out how conservation can actually directly contribute to these aspirations. And I'm sure many of us here share the idea that biodiversity conservation is not actually a priority of many poor or indigenous communities, but by framing that these aspirations can be achieved, one tool can be doing conservation, and then if they see that there's practical benefits at the start, and also it also contributes to cultural empowerment, then that can be a good start of a meaningful conservation relationship. And again, we've combined indigenous planning as well as modern planning approaches, including using, with respect to engagement of women. We do like all women planning in the community where men are excluded from intervening, and it's really very interesting getting development aspirations that are unique to women aspirations. And we also use photo voice. We give digital cameras and mobile phones to indigenous women, and then they take videos and photos of representative aspirations that they want addressed. So again, participatory planning and participatory rural development is, I think, one particular approach that's effective for us.
Thank you both. We'll have another question from University of the Philippines, Visayas. And this question is for Mr. Jason. And Ting said that the topic was very interesting. And what caught my attention was that the genetic diversity of captive Philippines eagles is greater than that of their wild counterparts. And I'm curious about the methods of approaches the Philippines Eagle Foundation is implementing to ensure that captive Philippines eagles remain fit for survival upon release into the wild in relation to both their wild counterparts and their environment.
Yes, thanks, Ting, for that question. So yes, well, the paper that I mentioned, the results of that is really very interesting because when our team were assigning, pairing designations, they only relied on the protocol of not pairing individuals that are coming from the same area. So that's the like a rule of thumb. And it turns out that that decision has wisdom because again, when we had this access to through a partnership for mitogenome mapping of Philippine eagles. It turns out that indeed some subpopulations have unique genetic diversity. And what actually happened apparently is that when you tried pairing birds from different individuals, they have an offspring that bears the genetic diversity from these parents, and it turns out that the young is sort of bearer of this genetic diversity. So what the paper that came out or that would come out soon affirms is that we're doing it the right way. But and yeah, so that's a very nice. But it also um, suggests that we should also be getting fresh genetic stocks from subpopulations that are not yet represented at our breeding facility. And as I've mentioned earlier, our breeding stocks are from rescued birds. So we need to purposely secure individuals, representatives of subpopulations that are healthy and coming from healthy habitats. Because again, many of the rescued birds are also from habitats that are also degraded. In terms of making sure that the released birds are fit, we have standards, procedures for um, releasing suitably reared birds. To be honest, we haven't had success in releasing captive bred birds, but we had success with releasing and reestablishing rescued and rehabilitated eagles. Um, we're now at the stage of introducing natural rearing in our captive breeding program, where a natural pair of Philippine eagles will take care of a young that they hatch. So you won't have issues with imprinting or the chick getting familiar with people. But if the bird is intended for conservation breeding, then you can raise it to be attached and familiar to a human caretaker. So I think that's the exciting methodology that we will start this season, raising chicks by the parents, and even also foster parenting if possible. And these are just standard methods for breeding and releasing suitably reared birds. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, this time, sorry. So thank you, Mana and Jason, for the presentation and all the answers, and also to is it Ananta? Yeah, Ananta, Alexander, and Thing for the questions. So we think that the Q&A session for now is done, but if you have any further question, we'll just address it after our fifth speaker. And before we go on with our third speakers, we'll take a group portrait for documentation purposes. So please kindly open your camera, and my friend Dita will take a screenshot for today.
Okay, kindly turn on your camera if possible and share your best smiles, everyone. Okay, first slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And second slide. 1, 2, 3. And third slide. 1, 2, 3. And last slide. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Dita. Oh, it's yeah, it's been like a lovely presentation, and yeah, it's been amazing. So we will just move on with our third speaker. Yeah, our third speaker is Long. Hi, Long, are you there? Okay. Hello. Okay.
So everyone seen the screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I really enjoy the true presentation, Manaus and Jason. And I think this is a great opportunity that we can share our work, our experience in conservation among the ASEAN country. Thank Mickey for inviting me. It's really a privilege to be here to uh, give you some information about the work that me and my organization, the Green Viet, is doing in Vietnam. Green Viet is a local NGO established in 2012. So it's quite a young organization. We work mostly focused on primate. Myself also a primatologist. I study the Duk language for almost 20 years. So our work is focused only in the central and central highland of Vietnam. So if some of you travel to Vietnam, we base in Da Nang city. It's a very lovely tourist with the nice beach and some ancient towns. Right? About the work that Green Viet trying to doing, we also have an approach of community-based conservation. So we work with the community, and since 2015, we try to work with a very special community that is business. We try to get the business sector involved in conservation, and we also have a plan to directly engage business sector, company, corporates, and private investor get into the conservation. And we are quite success until 2021. The private sector in Vietnam agree with Green Viet and other NGO in the country establish a wildlife conservation fund 2021. And the commitment for conservation from the private sectors in the countries is about $3 million for the first 5 years. So you can see on the screen is Conservation Vietnam is a fund that is newly established. So why I explain about how we engage the business sector and private sectors in conservation, because Vietnam, like other developing country, a lot of big company and corporates have a lot of development plan, including planning for land use, especially in the coastal lines, the coastal area with the forest for wildlife, but also become very interesting for the private sector to build resource, to make a bigger city in the coastal lines of the Vietnam. So get involved of the private sectors is one of the story that I like to tell you today, how to work with them and how to make it successful.
Excuse
And
me, Longham. I'm sorry, your slide is not moving.
okay,
Sorry for interrupting. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So the story when we came to work with a company called Six Sense, one of the international brand name of the resource in working in Vietnam, in the central of Vietnam. And when we work with Six Sense, we learned that they own land that is also habitats of the black sand duck language. Oh, sorry. Okay, so 2019, 2020, we start to work together with the Six Sense resource, and our field study found that in hundreds of 50 hectares of the forest that the resource own, there's a population of black sanduk language. And it's very important population because it's only population that live in the coastal lines. I mean, very special habitats, the dry forest, and is right there near the beach. So the population is very special. And the agreement is we try to survey the population and try to make a ecological study on the how the habitats is well for the supply the species, and also the species, the plant is also available for food for the species. And we also want to remove the threat to the species. We have done like monitoring population together with the staff from the resource, and from the map you can see that the black sanduk language is found in almost spread out of almost the area and outside of the nature of the resource as well. So the local people living around the resource also pushing snail to trap the species, and we also want to have the resource to build a better connection and better communication to the local people, because the local people want to catch the wildlife, and the nature resort it have a program together with Green Viet to protect the species. So we cannot working without the support from the community, right? So if the community get involved in the program, we train and we go to the village and talking with the local people about the program of the resource and Green Viet. So we have one full-time field biologist working in the site together with the sustainable department of the resource, and we do a monitoring yearly, and we also having a study together with the scientists to make a biodiversity survey in the area. So one of the things that we are seeing that the population is increase nearly double since we start work in 2019 after 5 years. What the indication of that is the population of the duck, the black sand duck, can increase quite fast, and with the efforts of conservation and remove the threat. So we learned from that, and we published this paper together with a scientist to explain about how we can work with the private sector. And one of the things is quite success is we convince the resource that build better communication to the tourists, to the guests coming to visit the resource. And it's very good that private sector they took is it's very good quick lesson. They have a exhibition on the black shark. They have a program in the even in the bedroom of the guest. There's a small booklet to introduce about the biodiversity and about the black shark. And we start to have them to build a visiting a part to visit to see the black shark group, and it turned out become very interesting for the tourists come to the resort, and the resort is so happy because they have more product to show to the tourists. So with the communication program, we have to allocate more information about the species. We public information together, and together with the Sixth Sense resource, we can say that they benefit a lot from doing conservation. And year by year, they are more aware of working with professional and committed conservation organization is helping them, right? It's kind of helping their business. They learn that it support a lot. Therefore, they publish more online with their websites, and they push more effort in communication material for the resource. And the communication with the visitor is also good. That many visitors come and learn about the species, and they even come back home. They still making their own guidebook or picture or exhibition about the species in their country. And some of the visitors even come back to work with us to raise funds for conservation of the species in the country. So, I mean, I would say this is a good channel to reach out international visitors to the local species, and that is if you do a good job together and a communication job with the tourists, you can increasing the support from the overseas, and this is something very clear in this case. And like I said before, with having all the staff, about 600 staff and 500 people joining the conservation communication scheme in the nature, in the resource and in the community. Right? And this is very successful program because before we came, the staff the attitude from the staff to the wildlife is so negative. Like they are afraid of snake, they are afraid of crickets, every animal, that because the staff they come from the city, right? And they come to the resort and working in the remote area. So they are very negative to the wildlife, but since they understand about the biodiversity value and they understand about the black sand duckland, they behave much better, and that is also have to please the tourists and the visitor, because the visitor also learn that okay, the staff is very how to say, have a very good attitude to wildlife. This is a good place that is good. I would come back again. So when we're talking about working with private sector, one thing I learned that to make a long-term cooperation, the benefits for private sector must be clear, right? Because they really like to combine the benefits, and if the program is make profits for them anyway, for example, that the resort they receive award from ASEAN Sustainable Hotel Awards, or they have a word on human act price. It's all that a word is kind of a good marketing for them, and is suggesting that the resource is getting the benefits directly from conservation activity and indirectly from marketing material, right? So they have a new product, and they have also a brand name is been well recognized as a sustainable resource or hotel. And with the Sixth Sense, they after 5 years working with us, they now impose a program that is working with people for planets and also for profits. So I mean, this is something that they come up after working with Greenfield, and I think before it's just profits, now people and planets, right? So this is something that I think that when we're really working together for conservation, you can change the policy, also change the partner towards sustainable conservation. So that's it. If you have a chance to visit Vietnam, or you can easily to go to see the Black Sand Dune and the Red Sand Dune as well in the coastal lines of the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Long Kai. It's definitely will be my next destination for holiday. It's I mean it's really cool presentation, and yeah, thank you for sharing this success story of conserving the species. And it's not just, you know, give the benefit for the species itself, but also for the guests, for the local people, and for the private sectors as well. And if you guys have any questions, just type it down on the column, the comment column, and we will address your questions after our last speakers. Okay, thank you, Long Ha. And we will just move on to our fourth speaker. Yeah, Darren J.O.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. Hello.
I think the screen is still being shared.
How can I stop sharing? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, hang on. Let me just share mine then. A second. Okay. Okay. Ready? Do I start now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, great. So let me just do this quickly. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darren Yeo, and so I've been asked to talk a bit about freshwater biodiversity conservation in Singapore, so highly urbanized. And I think some of the things I'll be talking about really are about the lesser known species. So let's get started. Okay. So very quickly, just to thank organizers for inviting me here to present this. A lot of the things I'm going to be presenting in partnership with various organizations, my own departments and various organizations here, government agencies, as well as Mandai Nature in Singapore. And a lot of this is with photos and inputs from my colleagues, students, and so on and so forth. So very quickly, I also want to give a very brief rundown. Most people are quite surprised to hear that Singapore has freshwaters with biodiversity worth conserving, right? Because it's a city state, right? So you might be surprised. Singapore has some interesting habitats and biodiversity in freshwater. So yes, we are a very urbanized city state. As you can see from the map, it's mostly built up areas, but you can also see there are some patches of green here and there. So essentially, Singapore as an island has a fair bit of water catchment. So 2/3 of the island is water catchment. And within our freshwater environments, we actually have natural freshwater habitats as well as artificial habitats. So in some of the central nature reserves, you will see natural freshwater habitats that are inside the protected catchments. These are generally forested forest streams. They have cooler acidic waters. Mostly native species are inside these places. They are dominated by native species. We have certain slightly more unique subsets of our forest streams that are what we call our hill streams. Singapore is very low-lying. There's no mountains here, very few hills that are left. But within those few hills, there's a little bit of forest left. So those are the forest streams there have slightly different conditions from the rest of the forest streams, which are usually more sandy and lowland forest stream type of habitats. And there are certain species that are found only in the hill stream habitats. Right. So we also have a freshwater swamp habitat. There's only one significant patch of freshwater swamp, but a lot of our diversity is there. And it's not really peat swamp, but it's getting close to that in terms of its acidity and its the nature of its waters. But of course, around Singapore, there's a lot of other freshwater habitats, which many people tend to take for granted. These are the urban freshwater habitats. They are what we call rural streams, where they are at the forest edge, or sometimes they flow out of the forest and into the more rural areas of Singapore. We have, of course, a lot of urban waterways, urban drains, concrete canals. These are for flood control, to carry away large volumes of water quickly, and also to deal with vector control, getting rid of stagnant water for mosquito breeding. We also have 17 reservoirs in Singapore. Singapore doesn't have any natural lakes at all. But over the years, we've created 17 of these impoundments because technically Singapore is a water scarce country. So we need every bit of water we can keep. But what might surprise many people is that we have quite a bit of diversity here. We have native biodiversity inside the forest streams and the swamp, but outside in the urban areas, we have some native diversity, but a lot more non-native diversity. And among the native diversity we have in our forest streams, a lot of it represents very important natural heritage. Many of these species are species that were described from Singapore, or at least type specimens or holotypes were from Singapore when they were described. Some are named after Singapore. So these are part of our natural heritage as well as national heritage. A lot of the native biodiversity is squeezed into certain forest patches in Singapore, small forest patches. So there is generally a freshwater biodiversity squeeze. If I don't care about the non-native species that are in the drains and the reservoirs, the ones that are in the forest streams are mostly restricted to this central area in Singapore, including a large proportion of our native species. And some of these include local endemics as well as global endemics. But we've also lost a fair bit of our species, and that's to be expected. It's Singapore has been developed over 200 years. A lot of the original forest cover was lost by the beginning of the 20th century. So we have had local extinctions or extirpations. And so most of the threat to our freshwater biodiversity is from habitat loss, at least up to this point, right? So most of the habitat has been lost, and a lot of whatever we have lost in terms of biodiversity is probably lost because of habitat loss. But what remains now tends to be lost at a slower rate in terms of habitat. In fact, they're trying very hard to keep whatever remaining habitat we have. So in that sense, other threats start to become more a priority than immediate habitat loss, including things like invasive alien species and so on and so forth. So essentially what I wanted to do today is to share with you about how we conserve one particular species, right? So we consider an icon. This is this little brown crab called Johora singaporensis. That's the scientific name. It's also known as the Singapore freshwater crab. So the Singapore freshwater crab is part of a genus that's found throughout the peninsula of Malaysia. But this species is a very small little thing, and it's found only in certain parts of Singapore and hill streams. And it's one of 3 endemic freshwater crab species. Endemic, i.e., only found in Singapore, nowhere else in the world. So when we lose it globally forever. It's become an icon of Singapore's national and natural heritage, even though it's small, little brown, nondescript thing, right? It's become an icon of our threatened aquatic biodiversity. It was discovered only fairly recently, 1986, not something that's from the 19th century or whatever, found in only a few small isolated drainages. Even when it was initially discovered and described as a new species, it was identified as a likely candidate for extinction because we were worried about its restricted range and its very stenotopic habitat requirements. This is found only in hill streams, and there are very few hill streams in Singapore to begin with. So there was that worry. So around 2008, the few streams that it was found in actually included one with site protection, was inside a nature reserve. But to our surprise, the one inside the nature reserve, the population started to decline or disappeared. And we suspect there was local stream acidification happening there. Because we thought that nothing, it's in a nature reserve, it should be okay. But, when one of the students of the original discoverer went in and found that the crabs had disappeared. So that sort of started the ball rolling to try to save that uniquely Singaporean crab. Right, so there were various conservation assessments that were done at that time. The Singapore Red Data Book, the second edition of Singapore Red Data Book, listed it as endangered before it was discovered that population in the nature reserve had disappeared. And then the global conservation assessment, we gave it critically endangered status. And it was identified as one of the world's 100 most threatened species. So up to 2014, basically there were some independent but informal efforts to do research and monitoring, some site protection, some very preliminary captive breeding efforts. But the problem is there was no specific integrated cohesive conservation plan. So what happens was around 2014, an attempt was made to try to develop a cohesive conservation strategy. So this is what we did for Johora singaporensis. The idea is at that time was to apply a formal strategic conservation plan along IUCN guidelines to try to save the Singapore freshwater crab. And at that time, that was the first one, an invertebrate species. So here's a bit about what we did. Essentially, we started off by gathering as many stakeholders as we could for a roundtable discussion. It was organized by government agency, National Parks Board, by academia, by Mandai Wildlife, which is one of the organizations here that's involved in Wildlife Reserve Singapore, as well as partners from IUCN. And what we did was we got representatives from as many stakeholders as possible. We got government agencies, we had NGOs, and so on and so forth. We want to bring the stakeholders together to consolidate what information was known about the crab at the time and what were the conservation efforts. But more importantly, we wanted participation across all the stakeholders, including some sort of peripheral stakeholders who may or may not have any interest in the crab, but their activities, their development, or anything else might have an impact on the crab survival. So the idea was to brainstorm and contribute perspectives to a plan that in the end, all the stakeholders would be able to support in some way or another, right? And ultimately, the idea was to balance the needs of the species with the needs of and interests of the people among the stakeholders. So it's not just a crab, right? Because we don't want, in Singapore, it's a bit difficult because the land is really scarce, obviously, and everyone is competing for land use. So the idea is you cannot go around and just say, okay, I want this crab conserved, this little brown crab, which nobody can see, conserved, right? It's inside the stream. You have to take my word for it, but it's very hard to see. So we can't just go around telling people we want to conserve that and everybody leave it alone. We have to be able to meet the needs and interests of all the multiple stakeholders. So we have to work together moving forward. So the whole program in that roundtable was focused on developing vision, goals, objectives, and actions. And we zoomed in on ecological research, site management, captive breeding, and education and communication. A lot of it was brainstorming. Ultimately, we came up with a conservation strategy which we have been following to as much as we could. We came out with a very broad aspirational vision for the crab. I'm not going to read it here because it will take a bit of time from the rest of the talk. But from the vision, we developed goals that are more practical to try to achieve that vision. And beyond that, we wanted to develop objectives and actions. Now, objectives and actions are what really help to make the goals achievable and in the end trying to realize our vision. In order to do that, we did a threat analysis. What are the threats? So we asked stakeholders to consider what are the threats to the crab, and not just what are the threats to the crab, but what is the association of the stakeholder with that threat? Am I causing that threat? Am I making it difficult for the threat to be alleviated? Or do I have is it possible for me to alleviate that threat? How does my organization or my own actions and activities affect the threat? So these are just some of the threats. There were many threats, but I'm just showing you a few. Rarity of the habitats I mentioned before, stream acidification, isolated subpopulations, small population size to begin with, and things like that. So ultimately, we came up with a threat analysis, and based on this threat analysis, we ended up with, there's a lot of words here, but basically we ended up with objectives as well as actions. These will give you more specific things to do to try to achieve your goals and ultimately realize your vision. We're not going through this, of course. This is all available online. You can go and see the Singapore Freshwater Crab Conservation Strategy is available here. So you just need to Google this. You should be able to get it from the Singapore National Parks website. So a decade on, that was 2014. A decade on, what has happened? We formed a working group led by the National Parks Board to see through the plan. There were various extensions of the breeding program. There was more research and monitoring. So we basically did more research to try to address the knowledge gaps that we had in understanding the crab. So we did things like genetic studies, which are reflected here. This showed that basically there was some distinction between subpopulations, so they recommended genetic mixing. We also looked at the possibility that drought as well as acidification might represent a problem for these crabs We just wanted to see if they would be resilient, if there was anything we could do. So at the biological level, we're also doing research. We also started more systematic monitoring as well as captive breeding programs of wild Singapore freshwater crabs. And in the process of surveying and monitoring, we found 2 new localities which were not known before 2014. So that was great. There was some captive hatching success, and we even managed to translocate wild-caught adults as well as captive bred crablets, baby crabs, into the new sites. Importantly, this is something that scientists like me sometimes forget, is the communication part, right? So the education and communication aspect of the conservation strategy has also been moving along through various engagements with the public, as well as various audiences, including today's talk. The Red Data Book, the 3rd edition of Red Data Book came out in 2024. The national status of endangered is still there because we are still quite concerned about its status. But good news is that it didn't get worse. Hopefully it can get better. So beyond that was just focusing on one species, but beyond that, in Singapore, we have other urban freshwater conservation efforts that are beyond the species level. Of course, a lot of it is zoomed in on research into various sites, whether it's the nature reserve or the reservoirs and so on and so forth. And we try to publish these works to enable science-based management. We also have efforts to protect, restore, and rehabilitate various habitats, including creation of buffer parks along the edges of the nature reserve that can help to buffer, protect the core forest areas, including the streams that are in these areas, the forest streams. We've also tried to instill more stewardship and ownership of the general public into the freshwater environments that they have. Although a lot of it is artificial or highly modified, they try to make it more accessible and more appealing to the public, so that they can relate better to the freshwater environment. In this case, they rehabilitated a canal, a normal storm drain, into a naturalized river. Although this naturalized river looks more like a river in a temperate country, not like Singapore, but it's still better than nothing, because if we really want to restore, we have to put in trees and all that, and we have to kick everybody out of the place. So this is sort of a compromise, and I think the public has responded well to it. It's dominated by non-natives, but it still has higher percentage of natives than a normal canal. So we take our small victories when we can. And finally, we continue with education and outreach. So beyond the science, we try to have publications and outreach that are more for public communications and so on. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren. Yeah, it's a very insightful presentation, and I think I'm one of the people who is very surprised with freshwater biodiversity in Singapore. I didn't think about it until until you mentioned it's amazing.
Okay, my own students are surprised too.
Oh, all right. Yeah. So if there's any people who want to ask any question, you can just type it down and we will address it after our last presentation, if that's okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Darren. So last but not least, we will move to our last speaker, Ibu Miki. Are you ready?
Well, thank you very much, Aret, and I would also like to thank all the presenters, Manau, Long, Jason, and also Darren. It's really insightful. I think this webinar for the reverse the red is really helping us to understand the problems and what we can do when we talk about our lesser known critical endangered species. And for today, I'm going to talk about one of the species that is critically endangered in Indonesia is a toad, a small toad. We call it the bleeding toad. And how we try to approach a one-plan approach for the conservation, not only doing research, but also an ex situ. And I'm talking here on behalf of my university and my lab, the Herpetological Conservation Breeding Laboratory. Oops, where's I need to change. Hopefully it changed. So the bleeding toad is very tiny. You can see, we try to put it on the fingers and it's only like 2 centimeters long. And this is a toad that lives in the mountain area. So this is only found in Java, mostly restricted to two national parks, which is the Mount Gede Pangrango National Park and Mount Halimun Salak National Park. Both are active volcanoes. So if anything happens, they will be gone. So we have problem with the frogs in our country. Most of you that is familiar with the global amphibian decline, have known that for the past nearly 20 years, there's a problem because of the Pichitas fungus. So
Bu
when I
Vicky,
thought,
sorry for
yeah,
interrupting, Bu. Your slides isn't moving.
it is actually moving in my slide. How can I do this?
I think you haven't set the full screen yet. So
Okay.
maybe you can stop sharing and reshare
Okay.
again.
Okay, I just stop sharing and try to share again.
Okay.
Uh, okay, let's see. Does it go to the citrus fungus?
Okay, already
Yeah,
full
that
screen,
way.
Bu. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, this citrus fungus has occurred all over the world. And when I first did my research, actually, I was wondering if we got citrus also in Indonesia, because mostly the global amphibian decline happening is mostly in the northern part of the world or the eastern part of the world, not really in the tropical situation. But then when we did the research around early 2000 and we did the swab in Gede Pangrango National Park, we found that some of the species also have chytridiomycosis, and one of it is the leptoprene crentata, or the bleeding toad. So somehow it doesn't want to. Oops. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Uh, and the baseline data about the amphibian in Gede Pangrango National Park is actually in the 1960s. And when we do the research around early 2000, we try to find out, the frogs that had been there 40 years ago. And we found out that one of the species that is really in decline is the Leptoprene crentata. So we could only find in one of the location, and it already moved, the distribution have moved down to the lower elevation. And we thought at the time is most probably because the climate change that also drive the possibility of the chytridiomycosis. But again, if we look at the threat of this bleeding toad, there is several threats. One of which, of course, the volcanic eruption. If the both of uh, the mountain decided to erupt again, it it will be crash it will crash the population, and also the chytrid fungus. It is possible that it doesn't really drive them to extinction, but still it will change the behavior, and probably also uh, make the population decline. And also the other stuff is the recreational activity. Both of the location is very popular for Indonesian youngsters. They go climbing the mountain and go to the area where the frogs habitat is. And when you look at the research and conservation and how many publication of the species, we found out that these species can be considered as neglected and poorly understood. We found out there's only 19 scientific publication on the species since the 1960s. And we actually in 2021 conducted a workshop on the conservation of the leptoprint. So not only for the leptoprint crantata, but also for the other two species of genus. And the report is available on the website if anybody want to look at it. So then we decided to develop this leptoprint project, the one approach project that will integrate the in situ and ex situ aspect of the species. So the main objective is understanding the ecology and the threats of these species or the genus, and also the establish the assurance population. So project started in 2021. But the herpetological conservation breeding lab is actually only started 2 years ago. So this is the team. I'm the project lead, and we have 2 units working on different components for the same goal. We have Rizky Tohir. This is actually my PhD students, and also for the field coordinator. At the moment, is working a lot on the ecology of the leptoprint crantata, and we have the ex situ. Nathan Rusli as the curator and Risma as the animal technician, and we have a veterinarian Eric just with our team. So the ecological studies, mostly we are starting to look at the baseline ecological stuff to enable us developing captive management techniques. So we look at the habitat, the diet, and the reproduction of the species. So for the microhabitat, we need to look what kind of temperature, the limit temperature they need, or can also all the others, the water quality and other parameters. So kind of like substrate, vegetation, humidity, even the UV intensity. So these all parameters, when we know it, it will be used to inform husbandry practices. And in another kind of work, we also do a lot of study on bioacoustic because we want to know what kind of use of the coals that they use. And this is done by Tohir and also by Risma. And because we want to know the population of the species in the field, and we couldn't really do a mark recapture study by clipping the tooth that some people usually do it for the amphibian, because this is one of the species that is protected. We have done a study on the color and pattern of the bleeding toad, the possibility of using that kind of color and pattern to identify unique individual and do this as a mark for the population study. And we also done the study, the diet study, not only for Leptoprint borbonica and Leptoprint javanica, but previously we also did it for the Leptoprint crantata, for the breeding toad, but we are using a specimen from the museum because we don't want to take a live specimen and look at the diet study. And so far we know that this genus eat beetles, ants, and spiders. So for the ex situ component, before we doing the captive breeding for the target species, the Leptoprint crantata, we want to learn more on the model species. So this is the other two species from the genus Leptoprint, which is the Leptoprint borbonica and the Leptoprint javanica. So we start using the model species to learn for the captive breeding for the management in 2023. So we start with the leptoprint borbonica. This is also a species that is restricted to forest, not only in highland but also in lowland, and they are actually also very small, but they are least concerned if you look at the red list assessment compared to the one that critically endangered. So we start a collection of wild individual, taking it from the Gede Pangrango National Park. And when we do the collection, we also measure the morphometrics of each individual. And before we took them to the lab, of course, we do, they have to be in quarantine. We look at the health of the individual. We see some of the diagnostics and make sure that they don't have any worm or any others, pathogen. Then we put it in the enclosure. At first, we put it in the complex enclosure, and we conduct a behavior monitoring, also do the planning and conditioning. And afterwards, when we are already successful, we conduct breeding induction, where when we hear the frogs are calling, the male is calling. We put them in the rain chamber and put the female together where they can amplex and then egg laying, and we just have tadpoles. So a few weeks ago, we are very excited because now we are having a new tadpoles of the leptoprint borbonica. So now what we do is trying to raise the tadpoles of leptoprint borbonica and develop also the husbandry guidelines and for the mature one and the larva development of the leptoprint borbonica. And afterwards, we are going to do a husbandry practice for leptoprint javanica. So this is the second model species. Once we successfully doing this for the leptoprint javanica, we'll move to the leptoprint cruentata. So this is actually a very short presentation, and this research and also ex situ activity can be done because there is many support, not only from my students, but also a lot of support from other organizations as well. So my heartfelt thanks to all of them, and also most of the beautiful photographs is taken by my student or my assistant, and also by the volunteer. So thank you very much, and thank you all for listening. And if there's any question, I'll try to give you comments after this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miki. That's very insightful. I've been enjoying this all presentations. Okay, so we will have another 15 minutes Q&A session. And okay, so I think there's okay. So yeah, I just checked our comments, and there's a question from Juan to Long. I think specifically for you. And Juan is a naturalist curator of the zoological collection at the Institute of Ecology and Systematic of Cuba. So the question is, how can we balance the need of, to raise awareness and secure funding for conservation efforts with the risk of negatively impacting species and their habitats through visitors' intervention?
Yep. Thank you for the question. And this question is also always come up when we writing a proposal and asking and looking for funding for research, right, and conservation. Recently, the ecotourism, including primates, bird, and other mammal become more interesting in the Southeast Asia, especially in Vietnam. So there's many organization and using the IUCN guidelines to really to guide the visitor and tourists to go into the protected area or to do a right behavior when you approach the wildlife. With the primates, first of all, I think that it's important to understand the behavior of the species. For example, the duck language is also one of the very sensitive with the habitat disturbance. So we try to do research on the distribution and also try to understand the behavior of the language before we design a tour or visiting location. So it's very much depend on how much you understand the species and how much you care for reduce the direct the disturbance from the humans when you design a tour or the path that you can take your visitor and tourists. To balance this with the needs of conservation, I think it's very the conservation is always looking for a more diversified of the funding to support conservation, and I think it's become more interesting with the private sector right now to get involved. So I think that if we are too strict and not understand about the species and their habitats, and we try to do ecotourism or guide for the visitor, I think it's easy to destroy the habitat. But the more you understand about the habitat and the behavior of the species, the better you can make a good design for the tour and the visit. So you acknowledge of the habitats and the behavior. That's my suggestion to balance and overcome of the need of the funding. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Long. I think build on that question, I have another question. Like how you not like persuade, but yeah, like persuade the resort, their management to, you know, to be engaged in this conservation efforts for the species.
Sorry, this is a question for me or
Yeah, for you. Yeah.
Could you please repeat this? I a little bit distracted.
Oh yeah. So it's actually my question, and it's built on one question. Since you work with you know, like private sector with the resort management, so my question is like how you persuade them to be involved in this conservation effort. How you persuade them, yeah.
Right, yeah. I think the first thing we approach is we are trying to say the biodiversity and the species is important for first of all for the well-being of the tourists, so that the visitor also have interest. And in the case of Six Sense, because when we visit the site, it's obvious that the black sand duck language was there. It's very easy to observe. So I think what we try to tell them is that the species and the biodiversity can be a good value add in for their business. And so we persuade them that how we can work together to protect the species and later on to become a successful story for the resort. That's how we start.
Thank you. I think it's really a good approach. And yeah, I mean, working with private sector, with the tourists for conservation, it's really possible, you know. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this successful story.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will move on to questions for Darren. I think we have lots of questions about freshwater biodiversity. Um, okay, let's start from. Okay, there's a question from Iga Novagita. So Iga is a student from Palangkaraya University. And Iga is very interested. Yes, so the question is, based on experience, what are the most effective conservation strategies to address similar threats in your region? Is it? Yeah. Because in Central Kalimantan, habitat destruction and water pollution pose serious threats to freshwater biodiversity.
Sorry, is that in the chat?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it. Okay, I don't know. Sorry, what was the question? How to bring local community and stakeholders? Is that the one?
So the question is, well,
I think that's from Iga Nova Gita.
yeah, Iga Nova Gita.
So it's actually asking, based on your experience, what are the most effective conservation strategies to address similar threats in your region?
It's
Is that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, and how can young researchers like me contribute to conservation efforts?
wow. So what are the most effective methods for dealing with conservation? Is that I couldn't quite.
Addressing that similar threat. I mean, for the freshwater ecosystem or community.
From my experience, I mean, my experience is limited to Singapore, where it's quite urban. I think what I mentioned in the talk is something that is I guess will hold true for wherever you have a lot of people jockeying for limited space and resources. So I think stakeholders have to, firstly, stakeholders have to be involved and talk to each other. But then more importantly, somebody has to bring the stakeholders together. So someone has to kind of take the lead. In Singapore, some of the things we do, I think it's maybe a bit easier because we're small. We're small, everyone knows each other, you can't hide from anybody. So maybe it's a bit easier in that way, in a practical sense. Yeah, I think stakeholders getting involved is very important. Plus, also some direction from someone willing to take the lead, to push everyone together, right? Knock heads, get everyone to come together. The other thing, what was the other question? Sorry.
The other question
Oh,
is,
young biologists, is it?
Yeah.
I think get involved in as many, from what I see, at least the experience here is what the students are doing here is they're getting involved in unsolicited. They're going approaching various organizations, government agencies, NGOs, just to get involved, just to get a foot in, and getting involved in biodiversity related work. Sometimes it can be something that is more glamorous, like going to the field, or glamorous for biologists, going to the field and wow, having some fantastic adventure and working with the animals directly. Sometimes maybe it's you sit there and do desktop work and do literature review but somebody's got to do it, right? So sometimes it's that kind of thing, and then sometimes it's communication, reaching out to the public and all that. In a place like here, where everywhere you turn is the public, right? You have to engage. So I think maybe don't be too fussy about what you want to do at the beginning. Try to get as much experience as you can, and that also helps you with networking. So when the time comes, the people who may be able to help or guide or push you in the right direction, at least they know who you are, or they can roughly remember your face or something like that. So being involved and being in the right place in the right time, I think that helps lah. I hope that answered the question.
So thank you, Darren. There is also a question from Dicky, a PhD student from IPB University. So Dicky has two questions. First one, how to bring the local community and stakeholders' attention to conserve the endemic invertebrate fauna with no direct economic benefit. Wow, from those species. It's a hard question. And the second one is, what is the effective approach to address the problem regarding the alien invasive species in freshwater bodies, including lakes yeah.
Okay, so invertebrates, right? Nobody cares about invertebrates. So but it depends. In the case of the Singapore freshwater crab, really, seriously speaking, it's a small little brown crab. And the only reason it is the center of attention now is because partly because the person who discovered it named it after Singapore. Then it becomes Singapore freshwater crab. Okay, now we have something to cling on to. And then also it's endemic. That makes a difference. It's endemic, globally endemic. So if it's gone from here, it's gone forever. So the idea is, I think, for invertebrates to get them exposed for different ways lah. The Singapore freshwater crab was also designated or selected to be featured in a book in 2012 called World's 100 Most Threatened Species, right? So it's one of the few invertebrates that was featured there. That also got attention of the authorities here locally, of people in general. I mean, of course, it's obviously not. It's very hard to tell really what are the top 100, because that was a selection, obviously, of representative species. But the fact that it got into that publication also gave it more prominence. The other thing is, if it's hard to convince people about uncharismatic invertebrates, right? Small, hard to see, and all this kind of thing. Then lump them together with a bigger topic or bigger matter. Maybe talk about the community, freshwater community as a whole, the freshwater assemblage or the freshwater habitat, right? I think there are various ways you can try to do this. Depends. Some people will respond to different things. Yeah, so I think there are several more, but I think that will take too long. The other question was invasive alien species. So in Singapore, we are so far fairly fortunate in that most of the non-native species are sort of separated from the native species. There's a kind of environmental filtering that's happening here now. A lot of the non-native species are in the artificial freshwaters. They are in the reservoirs, they're in the canals. And most of the native species are in the forest streams. And for various reasons, they will interact a little bit at the border, at the transition area, the edges. but generally the non-natives don't really go into the forest. But likewise, the natives won't come out of the forest. So we haven't had to deal too much with it, but it's something to keep an eye on. I think the reason why there's this separation is the habitats are quite different, and the non-native species are actually species that are more adapted to reservoirs, big open water, they are big animals and all that. If you have one of these big non-native species going inside the forest stream, it probably got not enough water to swim, that kind of thing. So that's one difference lah. The best we can do is to I think at this point is to try to publicize the issue of non-native species, because in Singapore a lot of them are brought in by people. Obviously, non-native species, invasive alien species, humans are the main pathway lah, right? Various things for food, for pets, for whatever. So the idea is to try to educate as best as we can, so that people are not releasing things indiscriminately. But biologically, right now in Singapore, we're not, apart from having to do weeding of certain nuisance plants at the edges of the forest, that's about the most that's been done right now. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
Thank you so much, Darren.
Yep.
Oh yeah, you already have answered like a few questions from the chat. Yeah. So maybe I have a question for Ibu Miki.
Is that the question? I think I've already mentioned that in the chat, Rupa.
Yeah, that's question is from me.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit actually,
Okay.
because this species, this is the only species protected by the government, for the only amphibian species. And it got protected because, you know, I always feel that the frogs is a bit poorly known, but then after hearing what Darren said about, the freshwater crab, the brown and not really good looking, I feel like, okay, my bleeding toad's looking a little bit better. But then again, we need a local champion or somebody who's doing the research on them to put them on, raise the platform. I think it's the same for other species, for primates or birds, or uh, contrary to the big charismatic animal, we do need to have somebody to lead, to do the research and do communication with the authority, and then say to them like, look, this species, I think it is going to be extinct if we don't do anything. So for the species, for the amphibian species, the Leptopryn crantata is then put as a protected. In actual, the habitat where they are is already protected because they are in the national park. But the only problem is the national park is the volcanic one, which is prone, after 150 years, they probably will, erupt or some things, and we don't really have set aside or an assurance colony. That's why we try to do the ex situ research, just to make sure that we have an assurance colony, hopefully maybe in the captive breeding, maybe in the zoo or in the laboratory, for if anything happens, we know. And in Indonesia, before we start, there's nobody really looked into captive breeding or any amphibian. So we actually, for the first 1.5 years, really have a hard time in making sure the Leptopryn borbonica, the model species that is least concerned, can stay alive in our lab. So when I put the pictures that we have tadpoles, and I think it's actually the third batch that we managed eventually to have them stay alive, and they breed and have the tadpoles. So that's the situation for the leptoprimate. So I hope it will increase your understanding about this species.
Thank you so much, Bhumike. Actually, that answered my untold question. Okay. Yeah. Oh my God, it's been amazing talks. I really enjoy it. I just want to confess that my background is conserving charismatic megafauna, and the talk that we have today is, it's very insightful. And yeah, I'm just glad, and I thank Bhumiki and IUCN ID Associate to give me this opportunity. Do we have any other question before we close? Okay, there is one more question. I think it's gonna be the last. Yeah. Where is it? I'm sorry, I lost it. So this question is from Winemar, and Winemar works with government. The government is especially in environment, and it's just curious about if we have the same problem like human persecution or land conversion, and what are the major threats in conservation, especially in protecting, like the resistant species. We can
Is
start.
Wittmer talking about the same problem in its country that we work on?
Yeah, I think so.
I think like for Indonesia, we do have problem of the habitat change, the conversion from forest to production land. And yeah, the threat is many, and it depends on the species. I mean, some of the species probably because of the illegal poaching, the others probably because of disease and forest conversion. So I think it's probably the same. I don't know. It's long. Do you want to talk about the Vietnam situation about the protection of species?
But right now, I don't have many comment on that. Yeah.
What about from Singapore government?
Wait, what? You want me to comment about Singapore government?
Like support, is it about support? Yeah. Or the major threats in conservation?
I mean, okay, generally, right, the major threat everywhere is always habitat loss, correct? So everywhere, whether it's terrestrial, aquatic, freshwater, marine, it's always about habitat loss and all that. In Singapore, I think I mentioned it just now, we already lost a lot of it already. So by the beginning of 20th century, 90% of our original forest was gone already because a lot of it would turn into plantations and all that. So even now, if you see development and buildings develop and all that, it's over secondary forest and things like that. But what little we have, we try to conserve. I think as far as I can see, in Singapore, there's a lot of effort put into trying to conserve what we have left, and incorporate it within the overall matrix. Because in Singapore, they have the government has this whole of government vision for Singapore to be called city in nature, right? So city in it. Last time it started off with long time ago, 60s or 70s. It started with garden city, then city in a garden. Then now they recognize that it's not just garden, right? So it's city in nature. So they're trying to incorporate that, bring city, bring more nature and less manicured garden into the whole concept of being part of the city. But of course, that brings other challenges. When you when you do city, you bring nature into the city, then you get human wildlife conflict. Then that becomes another issue altogether, right? People get bitten lah, or whatever. Then or people want to feed things, and then you feed things, then you encourage animals to lose their fear of humans, or you encourage non-native species, or things like that. So it's just really complex. Yeah. Again, I don't even know if I answered the question.
Okay. Thank you so much. So Celia, do we still have our previous speaker?
I think Jason is still here.
Okay. Can you just pin Jason?
Okay. Done, Kak.
Okay, thank you. So before we end this webinar for all speakers, what will be your take-home message for our participants here? Just 1 or 2 sentences. Maybe we can start from Jason. Jason?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Yes. Well, first of all, thanks for the very kind invitation. It's been a pleasure joining my fellow speakers. It's nice to see you, Mirza. It's been a while. Mirza and I were batchmates in the CLP training.
Yes.
And
Many years
also,
ago, a little bit long.
it's been a long time, 2004. So yeah, well, I think what's really inspiring is the fact that we have, second liners. We have the early conservationists who are now joining the force, and definitely we need more of you. And we hope that you'll join this growing movement. And again, we're doing this on behalf of voiceless and innocent creatures who unfortunately uh, is not used to is used to the threats of people. And I think it's a moral obligation that we should take on. So that's it from me, and thank you. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jason. What about from Wongha?
Yeah, I think for the young conservationists that is try to get into the work and try to commit with the conservation, I think most difficult thing is try to find out funding for your project and for your research. So I would suggest that to be more flexible and looking for something out of the box. For example, grant, and then make friends with people, and get them involved in what you're doing. Show them what you're doing, how impact to the wildlife and to the nature of your hometown. Then you don't know, one day they become your sponsor, and that is going to be a very good story, because you engage with people and people will support you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Wongha. And next one, Darren.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I think I just address freshwater biodiversity conservation. Those of you who have been asking questions about freshwater biodiversity conservation, don't give up. It's a bit tough sometimes, especially when you're dealing with small animals or habitats that is difficult for you to, for example, bring and show people, like, oh, look at this, because to see the animals, you have to go inside the stream to mess up. Then you mess up the stream, and so very often it's like, we cannot go in Singapore. You cannot go inside the stream, but this threatened animal is inside there. You have to take my word for it. or something like that. So don't give up. Try to latch on to things like more don't undersell your own smaller fauna, but make use of the more charismatic fauna. They can be mega, they can be mini, but for some reason they have some appeal lah. So latch on to that. And then the other thing was what I mentioned earlier also, try to get as much I guess this is similar to what Long is saying, a lot of try and get involved in internships and things like that, so you expand your network, right? And not just that they might be your sponsors or whatever later, but later you're all batch mates like this, right? You see Mirza and Jason, like same cohort, and then later when you have problems, you can call each other, you can cry on each other's shoulders or whatever. You can try to deal with problems, that would be harder to deal with if you don't know each other, right? So yeah, that's the parting word.
Wow, networking is really important too. Okay, next one, Ibu Miki.
Well, I think everything is almost always been said there by all the participants, and I'm really thankful for all the presenters that giving the talks, because I hope that all the participants can learn, because we have similar problems, especially when we try to do work on the conservation of lesser known animals. And as Darren said, don't lose hope. I mean, we need to keep going. We have problems with the funding, as Along said, but we can also work with the community, as Jason also mentioned in the presentation. So there's always a step to walk into. Sometimes I know that when, especially for the young generation, when you try to work on the species and you said like, well, there's nobody really done anything on it. So this is actually your chance, because nobody really look on the species. Then you can be the first one. Of course, the first 5 years probably is not easy. When I did my research on the amphibians. There's not many people doing amphibian research and conservation, and everyone say like, why do you look at the small species? It's not really beautiful. They're like, well, I like them, and there's nobody really looked into them. So be the champion of the species that you love. It doesn't need to be the orangutan, the big cute one, but it could be some that is really looks not very pretty for you. It's special, because like in life, there's people all over you that some is not really, the Hollywood stars, but the one that is meaningful for you is the one that you see every day. And now when they're not there, you feel like, oh, what happened? They're lost, and you can lose some of small, beautiful, orchid or wild orchid that usually around the road, and then it finished, and it's actually beautiful. Nobody really looked into it, or the freshwater crabs or anything. So do it, and we look forward for all the young champions to do it. I think that's my my thoughts for today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibu Miki. And despite all the challenges that you guys face for conservation, you show us like conservation threaten less known species do work, and it's really possible. And just don't give up, keep going. Yeah, and for young conservationists, we do need you too. Okay, I think thank you so much for all speakers. Thank you for sharing your experiences. It's very valuable. And for all participants, thank you for joining us today. It's been amazing talk. And for IUCN IDSSG, thank you so much for organizing this webinar.
Thank you for everyone. Bye.
Thank you so
Night,
much.
everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.